Right. Hopefully everyone online can hear and see. In the name of the Father and Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So, disclaimer, I prepared this topic before the pandemic, okay? So, obviously I updated it a little bit, uh, but just a heads up on what the context around it. And then we're going to talk a little bit because we can't talk about our online life without talking about what happened in the pandemic and how that affected us. So, but the context here is more around, think of before pandemic when, even during, in general, around our attachment to social media or similar, right? Our life in even devices, you can take it to that level too, or anything that's like through technology, right? Our attachment in that sense. And what does that mean? So that's what this topic is mainly about. But it's also just want to make sure that to. Okay. It's not at all condemning technology. It's not at all condemning social media. That's not the point, right? The point is not to do that. The point is to understand what it means, and where it is, what's its place in our life, right? What's the impact of it on our life, right? So not just social media, technology in general, right? Okay. So I'm going to go through the talk, and we might spend some time, because I still don't understand what the impact of the pandemic means in terms of like, now we're working from home. What does that mean? So I'd like to spend some time reflecting on it as a group, maybe towards the end. So some observations just from our, quick stats from today's life. Basically, 41% of teens admit they are addicted to their cell phones. And 43% of teens express the desire to disconnect, or express the desire to just leave the phone for a bit, like not have a phone or anything like that, right? Some of this might not come as a surprise at all to you. And this is an example of someone, I think, an executive at Samsung, I think, something like that. He, thank God, like no one was hurt, but he was a part of a plane crash. So as he came out of the flight, he tweeted, that he's okay. Not judging this, I mean, maybe this is his way of, making sure that everyone is aware that they're fine. But it's important. Like our devices are a very important point of our life. That's the point of this slide, right? And we also know this kind of dilemma of always wanting to actually be on the screen all the time. So this is where I was talking about, we're not condemning social media or anything like that. Connecting with people is a good thing, right? So is this addiction that we're talking about to devices and technology and whatever, is that because of social media, or is that because of something else, or is that because of, like, what is it, like, what's the real problem? And this is the example that Abu Anthony gave many times about the knife and the chef, where the knife can be harmful, but with the right use, it can be useful, right? One thing I noticed while researching a little bit, which was interesting, this is a trend mostly in Europe. So believe it or not, these phones started to show up. This is an example of a phone. I think now there are at least 3 or 4 now of those. When I was researching this, it was just this one. So these are phones that actually have LTE on them, like have internet on them, but they have no apps. They're just a feature phone. So this trend started happening in Europe, and more startups are starting to get funding for that direction, right? This phone is about $300. So it's not necessarily like it's not a 300, 400. It's not a cheap feature phone, right? It allows you to tether to your laptop, but it does not have any apps, right? And that's their I'm getting this from their website, the marketing material that they have. Your digital detox for a better life. The other thing is switching over to a balanced relationship with technology. And they're building a business on top of that, right? What I'm trying to say is it's enough of a real impact, and people are really feeling it, to the point that it's actually a demand that people can build a business off of, right? I don't know how new or is that something that you guys already knew about, and that's not news in terms of like how people want to get disconnected or not, but I thought it was like interesting.
Can you text?
Hmm?
Can they text?
In the what?
Can they text?
Can they text? Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can text. I don't know about email. Yeah, text. I can't remember but they can text. Yeah. I wish I had like a referral code or something I can send to you, but I don't. Okay, so we talked about the addiction a few times. So, but what are we addicted to exactly is an important thing. Like, because we need to understand this a little bit more and understand what the impact of this technology and this social media is on us if we are part of this, dilemma, right? Of too much phone, too much devices, too much this, too much that, right? So I'll give some examples of things. Obviously, they don't apply to everyone here, right? They might apply to some, they might apply to others, I don't know. But these are some things that, are obvious about social media and technology. When you notice, our expectations today are quite high. For example, Amazon Prime, right? Like I buy something, I'd prefer sometimes, and maybe that's my personal confession, but I'd prefer it to come tomorrow rather than getting a better one that comes in 3 weeks or whatever, right? The point is not the shipping. The point is my expectations. Now that's what I expect now from technology. I expect to have something right away, right? Forget shipping, even with the phone, right? Or with maybe social media, with something. I'm opening and I'm scrolling, I'm after something. There's something I'm after, right? What it is may be different from one person to the other, but there's something there that we need to at least think about before we kind of, go with the flow, if you will, right? So it's just a call for everyone to kind of keep that in mind. Everything is easier online, right? So, and we'll talk about what that means from a spiritual perspective, right? What that impact is. And then there's also a different thing we're going to again talk about a bit, but there's that pandemic shift of like all of a sudden everyone is working from home. And then right after the pandemic, you'll notice sometimes people are actually preferring to stay home, which not everyone, but what does that mean? All I'm saying is that I'm just bringing up these. I don't know the answers, by the way, but all I'm saying is that I'm encouraging every single one in their own personal life to just understand what that means, right? To look into it. And I talked about this already. Social, whatever, not social, I mean the shipping thing, speed, right? Things getting fast, things are easy, instant gratification, right? So, and yeah, and you know, likes on whatever. In this case, are we actually, if we are seeking attention and likes or whatever, are we seeking love really? Is that what we're seeking? Relationships, meaning, purpose, like things like that. So one thing from a spiritual perspective, is like, sure, who are we following? But I guess like the point here is the impact on the spiritual side could be if we are used to, if we get too used to that instant gratification and that quick, you know, answers, easy answers, things like that. What does that mean when I come to interact with God? What does that mean when I come to interact, like struggle in my spiritual life? We've heard so many stories, like an example of a story that I've heard from my father of confession many times about a monk who was fighting a sin for 50 years. He's fighting one sin for 50 years. 50. 50. Right? What does that, if my expectations are, you know, that low or that high, I guess, right? Is that I pray today, I have to feel something tomorrow, right? Or something, right? Again, it's all in the back of our minds. We don't think of it like as clear as that, but it's just in the back of our minds. Maybe one day is like exaggerating. Maybe I pray for a month, maybe I pray for 2, and I don't feel something, and I just lose hope, or lose kind of, maybe that's not the way, and I start doubting that practice, right? That's potentially part of the impact of this on our spiritual life, right? And these are the practices we were talking about. Essentially, for example, fasting is training to subdue the body, right? And among other things, of course, but I guess scripture and our daily food, these things, they don't, the transformation from those, they don't come quick. They may come quick, but I'm just saying, if our expectation is different, then it's going to be different. And being in the presence of God and meditating. A lot of times, confusion is just part of our dialogue with God, right? Sometimes we go through periods of confusion, and it's a part of the dialogue. It's very easy to kind of numb our senses with devices and with technology and everything, right? So the next thing is, I think this is an old slide. I can't remember the point of that one, but that's okay. Here, this is one thing I got from I guess the reference is down here. If anyone wants me to share the slides after, I can. But essentially, one person was talking about how to tackle this whole idea of social media before you post something, before you even do something, open something, start doing anything, is to ask yourself these 5 questions, right? And it's just to remember it, it's just the word think, right? So T is it the truth? H is it helpful? I, is it inspiring? N, is it necessary for everyone? And K, is it kind to everyone? And if you put that as something, and this is specifically, I guess, for posting or sharing something, sure, but it could be applied on any other thing you say, even to people without social media. So it could apply to those as well. Yes, Mike?
What if it's funny?
Okay, let's add F to that somewhere. Yeah, if it's funny, yeah. Well, there is use for funny, right?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean.
Okay,
I'm looking forward to see your post tonight, whatever that will be. So, um, so those are some things. Now, I want to just take a moment, like I mentioned earlier, and just um, share. And honestly, this is not something I prepared or not something I have any specific, research on. I just wanted to hear more because I'm not sure. I think it's beneficial for us as a group to actually just share what it means to us in terms of more life online during the pandemic, right? So some people, for example, say, I think it allowed me to focus more, or I think it allowed me to actually draw closer to God. Other people, maybe the opposite, or differently, or something. So I guess the question I'm posing, and this is really, I honestly don't have any slides on that. What was the impact in each of our minds on our spiritual life specifically during the pandemic?
I had to delete everything.
What?
Yeah, I deleted all my social media.
Okay.
Well, except for Facebook, but only because of Marketplace.
Okay.
Everything else, I like.
But what prompted that delete? Like why during the pandemic?
I was like, I found myself spending a lot more time on it than I was happy.
Okay.
With. And it wasn't. I just didn't like it.
You didn't like that attachment.
Sorry.
You didn't like that attachment? Is that
what? Like yeah, it was just a lot of wasted time.
Okay.
And time that could have been spent doing like actually something productive or like bettering my life in any way, not even necessarily spiritual, but just
right.
any way. Because it really is just dead time. And yeah, no, and I found a lot of stuff was just like really vain, and it's just like, why do I care about these things, and why does everybody care about things like that?
Okay.
I found it was like very not to defend, so I don't need to like offend anybody if people care about it, but like I found like it was like dumbing myself down,
Yeah.
It was like so mind numbing, and you just turn your brain off and then you just scroll, and then I felt myself getting stupider, and then so I'm like, sorry, and then I reached the point where I can't.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
The pandemic.
So you feel the pandemic expedited that? Like you felt like, okay, you know what? Because you're probably spent a little bit more time, and then you realize, okay, it made it more obvious.
Yeah.
Is that
like everything else in my life kind of grinded to a halt, so I didn't really have anything else to do, or I wasn't doing anything else.
I see.
Things that normally I would have to put my phone away for, like work or activities or whatever, because I just had so much more free time of sitting there and not doing anything, then I just would fill it with.
Interesting.
With my phone.
Right.
Yeah, so to answer your question, Patrick, I'm definitely going to buy that phone.
Fadi, what do you think?
Yeah, I did the same thing. So,
you did the same thing?
Yeah, I don't have Facebook for more than now 1 year and a half. Okay. So I figured out that I'm not curious anymore to know any news. Because during the pandemic, I just opened Facebook only one time, and I feel that it's up to my deepest. No, أنا كمان من الأشخاص اللي بتأثر جامد قوي بالنيوز. So
yeah.
I think that I don't want to hear anything.
Okay, interesting.
And to be honest, I bought from maybe 1 year a Kindle, and I think it's the best way instead of the social media. So I'm
started reading.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then with maybe I have the Twitter, but Twitter is more like أهدى من Facebook because there is no you have like a limited characters to write a post or something like this.
Yeah.
That's it. So مش هادي يعني.
Okay. Another thing, as we're going around, did you find yourself, for example, praying more?
Yes, and I have a lot of time to do more things.
Okay.
Yeah. My Facebook, and then I think because maybe I think when everybody had like iPhone, the iPhone like give you like
A timer?
A timer or report how many apps you're using during the week. So I'll know I'm good. Plus, for sure, the iPhone battery is good for that. So,
Okay.
yeah, so no, Facebook is really,
It's
I don't
interesting.
like it.
Okay.
The problem also that I know people that they lost the relation between them with Facebook and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. Pato, what do you think?
I mean, I also deleted some of my social medias. Obviously, Facebook I kept, but I try not to really look at it. Like I don't look at it often.
Sure.
I don't know. I remember like thinking like, maybe I shouldn't delete Facebook because there's like so much like stuff you can like learn about people. But I realized honestly like it's all just kind of a waste of time. Not
Sorry.
and not that you're not caring about people when you're not like hearing news from them, but it's just a lot of scrolling and a lot of like waste of time that can be used for something a lot more productive.
Uh-huh.
So I don't try to go on it. I've honestly been thinking of deleting it completely.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Social media is.
Okay. It's interesting that as you guys are talking, it's mostly about the social media platforms. So did you find any impact in terms of like your spiritual life?
Yeah.
When you went more online, like you're working from home, right? Okay. So just being at home in general, I guess instead of like working from home, it doesn't really, I guess, matter because you're working, but being more at home, doing less things because you can't do less things. How does that impact your spiritual life, or how did you find it impacting your spiritual life?
You know, it's funny. Like I find it sometimes even harder because
Interesting.
I still feel like you still have the phone, right? So I still feel like I find myself even at work.
Yeah.
When I don't feel like I'm busy, I find myself maybe going on YouTube, wasting my time with something else. It might not be social media, like maybe that's.
Yes.
But you always kind of feel like you replace it with something else instead of going for something a lot more productive, even spiritual or
Right.
not spiritual, doesn't matter. But I still very much think like you kind of jump from one to the other, and the goal is to try to replace it with something a lot more
Beneficial. Yes.
maybe get closer to God, like build your relationship with God.
Yeah. That's a fair point.
The goal is to cut.
Huh?
The goal is to cut.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah.
We'll put in the ball for you.
We should buy that.
And again, it's like obviously it's difficult, well, not difficult, but it's interesting because some of these platforms provide you some spiritual content, right? So it's not like the platform in and of itself is not like, but you're right. It's how we use it and how we are attached to it. What we get out of it is different.
The problem is you can look for those specific things, but you'll always find all of these other things coming
Around it. Yeah. That's true.
It's very difficult to find just the.
That's true. Yeah. I think that's someone in the Zoom meeting. So.
Well, I don't have much to say about this, but I feel like it's a little bit more beyond the social media. I mean,
Yes.
Looking at like men and women just progressing their career a little bit early or like in a young age, going to space in a shorter time. So I'm just talking here about the instant gratification.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's not really only about the social media, it's in everything.
Absolutely.
You want to go to Mars or Moon in a quicker or shorter time. So I don't know, maybe God should have changed his way and just like, I was wondering, like everything comes in a very short time or instant gratification. It's not only about social media.
I completely agree. And that's that was kind of, I guess, what I was trying to, but maybe some of the slides kind of hinted more to social media, but totally technology in general, getting things quicker, like you said, instant gratification. But one thing I would want to mention with that is that things that come quickly, right, go quickly too, right? Sometimes.
Maybe not
Maybe, maybe not. That's just, I mean, I'm not saying it as the
Look at-
truth. I'm just
look
saying
at-
my
look
own.
at going to Mars. I think we just spent shorter time now going to Mars, and I'm sure we're gonna build on this. I'm not against what you're saying. but-
Oh, yes, yes, yes. No, I meant about the gratification, I guess. Like, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting point. Maybe there are benefits from that, you know. So how did you feel then during that pandemic?
Well, it was very terrible for me in the beginning.
Whoops.
Because I was like just most of the time on Facebook, but I kind of managed to reduce to a shorter amount and like to just focus on what I'm doing, my studies and stuff like this.
Okay.
So gradually kind of improved, but in the beginning it was like it was a disaster for me, like
Okay.
spending a lot of time on Facebook,
Mm.
and Instagram, and social media.
Thanks for sharing that perspective. Carlos, what's up?
Yeah, same thing like everyone else shared. So it has been phases. Yeah, first phase is shocking and all this time.
Okay, yeah, all of this time, I don't know what to do with it.
And then I'm spending a lot like on social media, like no, this is way too much. Then cut the cord, like most of people did, like deleted them. But then I struggled with instant entertainment, instant gratification.
Sure.
Just now, like I used to like reading, but now I can't stand it. It's like if it's not really entertaining, if it doesn't really grab my attention, I can't.
Right.
I don't have the patience to, to read the whole book to get to the point. Like, and make them shorter. Like, why doesn't it just get to the point?
Right.
So yes, I think this is how it affected how I think and how I even like do the things I used to like reading now.
Yeah.
I don't have enough patience for it.
Right.
So, but at least I'm more aware of it now. So I try to manage this.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't cut the cord like completely, so I still keep Facebook because I really.
Yeah, and the idea again, like, it's not necessarily that you have to cut that cord, like.
Ideally, would be just.
Okay.
Over
Interesting.
there, but
Okay.
I think managing how to use it too is.
Mm.
Especially like it's a way for me to connect with what's happening in Egypt, for example, and I don't see other way to keep up with the different changes. I'm
Right.
interested to know what's going on.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of spiritual life or how like during the pandemic, again, yeah, I think like by the end of it or like by now, eventually you feel like you're going closer to God actually eventually.
Okay.
Regardless of what phases I go through the pandemic, but it kind of makes you think and rethink everything. But
Right. Okay.
in a way that.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. Rico, how did you feel your spiritual life was impacted?
Yeah, no, I think it was good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I was I was keeping myself busy all the time, and like as soon as I would finish work, I'd go do something. I'd go play soccer or do something, just to kind of fill in the gaps. And I find that like I was neglecting prayer a lot.
Uh-huh.
Like even till now, like I think the difference is that because you were forced to stay like at home.
Yeah.
You're forced to kind of deal with yourself and
Right.
forced to pray, forced to read. So and then now like we're opening up again. It's like you realize like you're filling the gaps again, but this time you're very aware that like you're missing something that you've gotten yourself accustomed to over the past year and a half.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's nice that hopefully we can keep it.
Hopefully, yeah. It's good. Kimo, what about you?
My experience was okay. At the beginning, I was faced with the realization of my own mortality, and I came to understand more the church has always said we look for the resurrection and the life of the age to come, and the pandemic is something that brought that a lot closer to home for me in terms of understanding why the church always looks ahead. And I don't know, I think that was my biggest realization. I think same with everyone, we all had our like cycles in the pandemic of ups and downs, and I don't know. I think I was also really lucky because I got the opportunity to pray a lot at church and stuff, so it wasn't usually as hard for me as others. But,
Thank God.
honestly, it was a blessing. Like it's an experience I'll surely never forget.
Yeah.
Whether it brought me closer to Christ or not, I honestly don't know. I think at some points yes, at some points no.
Right.
But it's an eternal struggle. So
That's
that was
true.
my,
Yeah.
my experience.
Thank God.
Yeah,
Thank God. Marianne, you want to share?
Yeah, sure. It's actually something that I'm struggling with now.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Because I agree with what everybody said, but I I find it really hard. So in the times where I try, for me it's like a cycle. So I will get on social media, think that I got it under control, but then find that I'm on it way more than I need to be, and then it affects how I feel. Kind of like saying like it takes up my time, I'm less productive, I feel worse about myself, you start comparing, you start like seeing all of these things that you don't really need to be seeing anymore. And then you start to try to convince yourself that, oh, but there's a quote in the middle or a verse somewhere or a sermon that I listened to, like, so you try to justify it by thinking there's like a bite-sized holiness somewhere, and then I have to go, okay, well, I have to take it all off, so I get rid of it all, but then I don't know what to do with my time, so I end up getting it back. So it's like a vicious cycle.
Right.
And I think it's interesting that everybody touched on that, because we all kind of go through that time where when we're on it too much, it doesn't just affect our time, it affects who we are. And I think you're right, like the reason we're on it so much is we're trying to find all of these things, find purpose, find love, find meaning, find connection, which the irony is it disconnects you even more from everything. So I think that is the pandemic where was the biggest social experiment for everyone because these apps are designed to cycle in, like the algorithms can be made to make you addicted, like slot machines. And so we, like, depending on your relationship with it, you might have gotten sucked in and
Yeah.
pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm still figuring it out. I don't really have the answer, but
No.
hearing everybody else's take on it, it's definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, you're not alone for sure. Yeah. Right, Marina.
I think everyone has said before, but we think it's more phases. So at the beginning of the pandemic, it was a bit difficult, but then it was helpful because we spent most of our time like have, having something to watch online, like because of the church, they always did something online for us to do. So I found myself like every day had a ceremony to attend. At the evening there is a talk or whatever. Every day something like this. So I found social media was a bit helpful for some time. But then when the church was open again, everything started to be back to normal. And
Right.
we took everything for granted.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, yeah, it sometimes was helpful, but yeah, it's useless most of the time.
Right.
But yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I'm not judging anybody, but during the pandemic, so like I saw people like that getting closer to God through the social media. For instance, I saw some people suddenly they are posting verses every 20 minutes or every 1 minute, or prayer, please God help me. For me, as a Fedi, I don't want to see your spiritual life on Facebook. If this is something wrong or right?
That you don't want to see it on Facebook?
Even, I'm talking about the behavior.
Oh, I can't tell. I think mostly it's about the motive. Like, what's the motive?
I don't, for me, I don't know, but is it right to like post something about your behavior, sorry, about your spiritual life on Facebook so everybody can see it?
Well, is it beneficial? Is it helpful? Is it the truth? Right? Yeah, it depends on what. So it depends, like if it's helpful and if it's actually bringing other people closer to God. Well, and it's hard to quantify that. Like it's hard to. Maybe you reacted to it like that. Maybe someone else reacted to it differently. Maybe someone else saw this as an opportunity. You know what? I've been meaning to talk to someone. I don't want to go talk to let's say, someone specific, my father of confession, whatever, I needed a friend, and they noticed this person posting a lot, and they felt comfortable to go talk to them about something. You never know the impact of you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like your reaction to it might be valid from your point of view, but from another point of view is different. So it's hard to tell if it's right or wrong. I mean, we can argue that like the scripture is what gives us life. It's the words in this, but people can also take scripture and put it out of context. So
Yes.
it depends.
Yes.
It depends.
Yeah, I heard many opinions in this part. So one of the opinion that I heard before, like social media is not a place for worship.
Well, that's one opinion, and it depends. Like I said, I don't know. I mean, does anyone else have an answer? Because I don't know.
With you, like it's in a way like how people post. We start to get to know people more, Like imagine you have 600 people or 500 people on Facebook. Normally you won't interact with as many people on a daily basis, but now you can actually know how different people think by the way they post. It can be helpful, it can be, as Ahmed said, can encourage someone to reach out to someone because based on what they're posting, I now know more about them, or maybe at least about their spirituality, and maybe they can trust them to ask them. I guess they can. I wouldn't do that myself, بس مش معناه انه غلط. يعني لو انا مش بعمل كده او انا this is not how I interact with God. I don't put
I'm
it
not talking
publicly.
ان هو غلط، بس I'm talking ان في ناس بيبقى عندها الدوز ده زياده عالي قوي، يعني تحس ان الموضوع يعني انت تحس ان انت بقيت اوفر ويلمنج، ان انت بقيت مثلا كل ما تفتح الفيسبوك بعدين ب5 دقايق تلاقي فيرس جديد اتحط، اللي هو يعني هو ده اللي انا بتكلم عليه، مش بتكلم عن فكره البوست
No, I think
نفسها.
I hope it's helping for them for somehow. Yeah,
Maybe.
they're posting, but لو أنا حاسس إن أنا overwhelmed by this kind of postings, I try to block as much
Yeah,
as possible.
you could.
So I try at least it doesn't have a negative impact on me, but hopefully it helps someone else.
Any other comments? I have just one thing to conclude to actually help us kind of try something. Yes. Yeah.
Because I just feel like with this social media thing, what keeps coming to my mind is that when Christ said it's better to cut your arm off and be maimed than to enter the kingdom of heaven. And it feels like sometimes it's kind of the relationship you have with social media.
Wow.
At least from my perspective. Like, of course, Christ was speaking in hyperbole to, like, not.
Yeah.
He doesn't want you to actually cut your arm off. But, like, in this instance, like, social media is something that you can cut off if it's causing you to sin. So, like, and I think this kind of ties into what Fadi is talking about. Like, in the end, everyone has to sit down with themselves, I think, and examine their own personal relationship with social media.
Yes.
We all use it in different means for different things.
Correct.
And if you can handle it and be void of sin, then use it. If you can't, then maybe it's better you take some time away from it. And I think that's why we get into the cycles too, as Marianne is saying. So, like, as much as we try to make blanket statements about social media, sometimes it is just like your own exposure to it and your own personal experience to it. Because someone can use social media and not be affected, and others can use it and it's a detriment to their spiritual life. So, like, I know, like, I think it's helpful to have like a general conversation about social media, but like as in with the spiritual life, most of the things come down to your own personal relationship with it. Because in the end, you can only truly, honestly understand why you're using social media. Like, as much as someone might try and find conclusions or reasons as to why you're using it, you'll truly come to understand it when you sit with yourself, and then you can make a better decision as to whether it's leading you towards the kingdom or whether it's maybe making you focus more on the earth.
Yeah. And I thought it's very interesting that you made that connection between that and like Christ, and he's talking about the eye as an organ, right? So it's like as if it's like part of you.
Yeah.
And I completely agree. And the whole, my hope is like was with this is that we actually individually just sit with ourselves and ask ourselves, what is it am I after here? for me, I found it like, personally, I found it just going back to, I'm just seeking meaning or seeking love, right? Like in a way, God, right? Like that. But it's just, I'm just going back, I'm just trying to find him somewhere, right? But I completely agree. Every single person is different, and we are encouraged. I guess that's part of the last thing to say. And thanks for sharing that, Kareem. Is that I had a slide here that I skipped. I thought I'd add it to the end. Okay. So some of it has, like, I guess, like coincidentally, some of you guys already mentioned about limiting your interaction with social, but these are things that are not necessarily what I'm asking us to do, but just as examples, I would add to this is also exploring my motives, right, and my desires with that. But essentially, what I was asking is that we need to pray about these things. We need to pray about what my needs are, what my wants are, that relationship with technology or with social media, with general, like how can I make it beneficial, right? Is it beneficial? Do I need to cut it off or not, right? I guess the limited interactions with cell phones, maybe that's something that's a preference on my side, and maybe because I work in technology, I don't know, but I just felt like it's a suggestion. It's not, something, these are not the 3 commandments, but like it's just something that I'm suggesting as well. Obviously, read the Bible more and read scripture more. And then, we can take it from there. But I guess the biggest thing is to really understand what that means for us, right? Each person on their own, because it's like everyone said, it's very individual. We can't generalize the impact of something like that on everyone. So I'll just end with this verse. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. So it's all about discernment, I guess, and it takes a lot of wisdom and discernment in that. Any last minute comments?
I had a question.
Yes, Kareem.
Could you share with us your pandemic experience?
Oh, that's actually a good point. I realized I didn't share that. So for me, I think it was actually a pretty big transformation. It wasn't small. In one way, in a lot of ways, I guess, the main theme was realizing how far off I was. And I'm not talking just about social media. Like prior to the pandemic, one of the thoughts I have is like, man, like there's a lot to do in service, and like I don't even have time to pray. Why are we doing all these? I'm confessing, right? All these logistics, right? And we're not spending time in prayer. خذ يا عم time, ادي time. Here you go. What happened? I didn't pray as much as I did not benefit as much as I wanted, which means, what was I complaining about exactly? Like that wasn't my desire. My desire wasn't to pray. And that was a huge realization, is that, and then I started to ask and that was early in the pandemic, and I started to ask, what is my desire? And that's been quite the journey. Like I'm still understanding more and more. But to me, that was the effect of the pandemic, is that I thought that I was busy, obviously with kids and everything is even busier, but here you go, there's all the time you need. Didn't change that much, right? And I'm closer to the end of hopefully it's the end closer to the tail end of it. Now I'm starting to realize how I need to build different habits, and it's at the end of the day, it's what I want to do, and I'll make time for it. It doesn't matter if I have time or not. At the end of the day, I will make time for it if I want to do it, right? So that was my biggest thing with that. Any?
I have another question.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
You said that you limit your cell phone use. Do you give practical ways that you limit your cell phone use? Just meetings people are trying
Sure.
to
Sure. So I'm not an expert, but here's an example I do is, for example, I disable most notifications. I just keep my phone notifications, obviously, like when someone calls, or SMS, like WhatsApp, I don't get notifications. Facebook, I don't get notifications. Anything like that, I don't get notifications. And what I found myself doing is that when I have time, I open WhatsApp to check, okay, this is what I missed. I respond, I close it, but then I don't get. Another thing I started doing is I started putting my phone in one spot at home. So when I come home, it's at my desk in the basement, and that's where it stays. Obviously, I miss more calls, but at the end of the day, I feel like I'm a lot more focused with what's happening. Still didn't, like I said, I don't know about the spiritual part. I'm still working on, but at least just being more present. These are a couple of things that I tried.
I do the notifications thing too, actually.
It helps a lot.
Does that the flashing of the screen? It's psychological. It's crazy. You don't realize how you're constantly.
You associate it as if something's important that you need to, but it usually most of the time it might be important, but it's just too much. It's gonna come and keep coming.
And the interesting part too is so I was saying with you, I miss a lot of calls and I take a long time to respond to the messages, and it really rubs people the wrong way. It annoys me, and it's kind of an interesting this difference between how they're always you have to respond fast, and some people I know that they'll respond to me before I can even get a chance to exit the chat.
Yeah.
I'm what are you doing? How are you just sitting there like that so fast?
Yeah.
And then so I don't know. It really was kind of doing that was a big eye opener for me for how almost everybody at all times is kind of sitting on their phone. They're present on their phone all the time. And then if you're not, it's well, why are you doing that? Why are you? Why are you? I don't know.
Or do you think it as you're upset with them because you're not answering quickly?
Yeah, I always apologize the first thing after responding. Maybe usually it happens most of the time. It happens someone messaged me at 7 p.m. I answered the next morning.
عايز اقول لك الموضوع بيبقى اسمه مثلا بقى لو انت بتوريك ابل واتش انسى.
Well, I got rid of my watch.
Every 1 minute.
Yeah, so I got rid of my watch because of that too.
Yeah.
Right, because it was tough. But anyways, I mean, these are ideas. You could have different ways to do it. I think there are now settings in the phones. Sorry.
You have a cage you can buy where you put your phone in the cage and you set a timer, and you can't it doesn't unlock until the timer goes down.
Wow.
Have you ever had an Android app where he would lock his phone and you literally cannot use it for the time it's locked?
What if there's an emergency?
Yeah.
You can't
No,
open it.
I think you can get it for emergencies.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you see these trends are there's a part of it that I think what you mentioned, Eric, is sit with yourself. It's very hard, by the way. It's very hard. Anyways, it's interesting. So I hope this helps.
Honestly, the bad habit I developed is even if I turn notifications off, I always pick it up.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that's the one thing I want to stop doing.
We're so afraid of sitting with our own thoughts that any
Yes.
seconds that you're
Well, at least that's what I realized too. It's a habit, yeah.
do. You don't want to do that.
If it's just there, you know, like you can even see you didn't get a notification, but you pick it up anyways. And
Yes. Unlock it, lock it again, put it back.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, just for the sake of. So, you know, sometimes I find myself. This used to happen to me. I'd look at my phone and then I put it down, and I realize I don't know what the time is. And then I think to myself, I just have my phone in my hand. I should know what the time is.
that's true. Exactly. You just didn't even look at
I
it.
didn't
Yeah.
notice it.
Yeah.
I just picked it up and looked.
Totally.
Didn't comprehend what I looked at. I just picked it up, looked, and put it back down.
Totally.
And then I'm like, what time is it? Oh, I'll check my phone. So I pick it up again, and I'm like, why didn't I just like register the time when I just looked at it?
And it would just tell you what this means in terms of your attention, your presence, your mindfulness, like all that, like where's that going? So it's not only spiritually, it's also psychologically. So it's interesting.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like, what are the alternatives to keep up on what is going around you? For example, like for me, what I do on Facebook is just like all the news pages and like the
Sure.
pages that I'm interested in. And
Sure.
the reason I go to Facebook, not to check on other people or anything, I just basically
Get the
scroll
news.
up and down to see what is going on around the world. So what is the alternative ways of doing so instead of Facebook?
Why would you need an alternative way?
So we should still use Facebook for that. I mean, like.
So I guess I guess like it's not about Facebook at all, right? If
But here's the point, sorry.
Sure, go ahead,
So
yeah,
what
yeah.
happens on the way, like I'm going to check the news on Facebook,
Mhm.
the things I'm interested in, I just come across some other stuff which is gonna take me away from my purpose. Like I go, like, just to check, let's say, whatever, Financial Times or whatever is the newspaper.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that only one, but I mean, just overall, I want to understand what is happening with the vaccine, what is happening with, like, let's say, the economy and the stuff here and there. So, like, should I maybe do a list of, let's say, newspapers or stuff, and then just go?
You could. Is it?
You need to switch to Twitter.
No.
Because there's like actual like news stations.
Yeah, we could use that one. That's it.
For like CNN or whatever news station.
But sometimes it's like just this one is very like specific to, let's say CNN, it's just maybe, let's say, to US and maybe.
Well, can you customize your news feeds in Facebook? I don't know.
Yeah. There must be something. I guess so. There are multiple sources of news. Like if you're talking about news specifically, yeah, there are many sources of news, right? So I guess I would like suggest that you challenge that thought in the sense that when you open Facebook to check the news, do you feel it's harmful? It's
Sometimes.
okay. So then that's a motive to actually look into why it's harmful. What is it about it that's making it more addictive or more like wasting of time or not useful? What is it about that, right? And then you can find a way to either change your settings or ditch the app and just choose something else. But it all depends on what's its impact for you, right?
What about you, your personal experience? How do you keep up with things going around you?
I don't, not as much. Unfortunately, I'm so bad at this. I mostly just someone I meet or whatever say, have you heard of this? No, I haven't. Share, and that's about it. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not a good example with keeping up with the news.
You're married and you have a family.
Maybe I have enough news, I guess. I don't. But yeah, what's interesting is another thing that I noticed is that, for example, at some point I disconnected from Facebook, and you know what's interesting that happened? I got hooked into LinkedIn. Yeah, which is interesting, right?
It's worse.
It's a similar thing, but then I kind of stopped, started using it less now, but I guess it just goes to show that you may leave Facebook as Facebook, but you might be addicted similarly to something else. So it's all about, and that's why it's important to understand the motive, like why is it a problem? Is it a problem? Why is it a problem? And those two are different from each person to another, right?
I think also you need to have a plan, or at least realize that whatever you are going to ditch is going to leave a gap.
Absolutely,
And if you are
absolutely.
Not, if you don't have a plan or like, if you don't know what you're going to do with this gap, you will end up either finding another
Exactly.
or going back to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just figure out that there will be a gap.
المشكلة
There
ان
will be
انت
like
لو
withdrawal
المشكلة
symptoms.
كمان انت لو بطلت ورجعت تاني هتبقى راجع اكثر من انت بالظبط.
Maybe.
فدي مشكلة.
Sometimes.
Just like
Yes.
All right. Good to go?
Huh?
Good to go?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone online too. And I'll stop the share here. Glory to God forever. Amen.